Do we have Terrence?
He's coming in now. Waiting for his audio to connect. We are live.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate everyone rearranging their schedule so that we could take care of some emergency business, as we call this emergency meeting to order of the Augusta-Richmond County Board of Elections, Friday, March 12th, 2021. Lynn, if you would go ahead and get us going on this, I'd appreciate it.
I will, Mr. Chair. Board Member Dix, is he, Terrence, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Very good. Yes, we were just about to get started.
Good. I'm sorry it took me so long.
Well, no problem. Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We are gathered today because we were notified yesterday by the Director of Parks and Recreations for Richmond County that the recreation facility at Minnick Park would not be available to use as a polling place for next Tuesday's election. We've known for some time that there was some structural damage to the building there at Minnick Park. We know the building was built in a floodplain back in the day, and because of that, there has been issues with the foundation settling over the years. But what happened is earlier this year, when we had the great deluges of rain, it further undermined the foundation and increased the crack in the structure. So out of an abundance of caution, Director McDowell had the building looked at by our code enforcement officers, who then recommended that we have an architect, or recreation department have an architect come in to inspect the building to make sure it was safe. Architect did come in to inspect, and again yesterday afternoon we were notified that the architect determined the building to be unsafe for occupancy due to the structural damage caused by the settling of the building. So here we are, as you well know, just a mere 4 days away from an election, with 3,000 voters without a home on election day to cast their ballot. So I'd like to start off, Travis, I guess we'll start off with maybe the background report, if you would pop that on screen. And I'll give a little bit of further background, and then we'll talk about the laws and continue on with the report at the end of all that information and of the question period. We'll need to have a motion on how we're going to proceed and moving forward with the election next week. You should all have a copy of the report, but for those of you who may not have received that, here it is on screen. I'm going to start with the top and just give a little bit of information, and then we'll switch over and talk about the law. So as I said, we were notified yesterday of the condition of the building. Once we got the news, we immediately set about trying to determine a suitable place for those voters in precinct 208. There are 2,769 registered voters that are affected by this. The first thing we looked at was to determine which precincts were actually contiguous to the Minnick Park precinct. And the three places that you see listed on the report, those being Asbury Church, Augusta Deliverance, and the Henry Brigham Center, were the three that we identified as possibilities with no research. This is just looking at a map and seeing what might be available. I'd like to go on through the analysis of the three locations and then change gears over to the law that governs all this, and then we can go on with further discussion.
Proceed.
Thank you. So the Asbury Church. The Asbury Church is located the closest to Minnick Park at 1.3 miles away. Unfortunately, the Asbury Church, there are nearly 3,000 voters that are already assigned to that facility on election day. The facility there at Asbury parking and the building is adequate for the voters that are assigned to them, but it's not adequate to add additional voters to, in our opinion. Not just the size of the room and the parking lot, but furthermore, the electrical configuration that would be required to put additional scanners and machines in there to accommodate extra voters. The next place we looked at was the Augusta Deliverance Evangelistic Church, and that one's also close, located 1.4 miles away. But it was the exact same situation that we saw at Asbury. We saw a facility that currently has around 1,400 voters, and they are fairly well at capacity with their 1,400 in terms of electrical capabilities, parking, and size of the facility. The last place we looked at was the Henry Brigham Recreation Center. And that one is located the furthest away, but it's best suited as a polling place to accommodate, set up to accommodate more voters. We know that the Brigham Center is located 2.8 miles from Minnick Park. Other things that we know about that facility is that it is fairly well known in the community. It certainly has adequate parking, interior space, and electrical configuration to support more voters. Now, currently there are 4,129 voters assigned to the Brigham Center, but there are other things that we'll talk about later in the report that provide some useful context to it. And Travis, let's go ahead and switch to the next page, and we'll go ahead and cover some data, and then we'll go to the law. Okay, so giving more detail on these polling locations, the table that's provided there gives you an outline of all four of the locations that we're talking about today. That's Minnick Park, the affected facility, Asbury Park, Augusta Deliverance, and the Brigham Center. The number of registered voters we've already talked about, but I think the numbers that are important to look at are to consider is the expected turnout that we think will show up in person next week at the election, and how many estimated voters we think will go to these places if they're combined. And as a point of reference, I also included in there the turnout that we saw on Election Day on November of 2020. And the reason I put that in there is to help us weigh the expectations for next week's turnout against how many people actually have successfully voted at these facilities at previous elections during the course of any given election day. You'll see at the chart, looking at the chart, we are expecting about a 10% or so turnout for the election next week. The advanced voting numbers and absentee ballot numbers that we've seen so far are very, very light. We are fortunate indeed that this situation occurred previous to an election where we were not expecting a big turnout. Otherwise, our answer to our dilemma may not be as easily found, but these are the situations we find ourselves in, and we're fortunate in that regard. Now, what's not indicated on here are the actual numbers that show how many people in these precincts have already cast a ballot in this election. The column that you see that's entitled Estimated Voters on 316, that does take this number into effect, but I would like to mention the specific numbers just to give you the full picture. The Asbury precinct or polling place is made up of 3 different precincts, and so far, out of those 2,700 voters, only 36 have cast a ballot. Augusta Deliverance, out of their 1,400 voters, they have had 21 cast a ballot, but Brigham Center, out of their 4,000, they've had 106 voters cast a ballot. We know that Brigham Center is a very popular option during advanced voting, and the people that live in the immediate area of that facility, many of them take advantage of advanced voting. Now, the numbers that you see here on the screen reflect activity that we had through the close of business yesterday. They do not incorporate any other voters that may have voted today. So let's talk about the law and how this whole thing works and where we go from here. So Travis, if you wouldn't mind, if you could put up that document that shows the code section. Okay. So the first section of the law, I've highlighted the appropriate area, which addresses what you do when you have an emergency like this. Of course, it happens sometimes. In a perfect world, we have lots of notice that we can use that time to properly notify voters and to find an alternate polling place and whatnot. But under emergency situations, which sometimes happen, we don't have don't have all that time to do that. And so when you have those situations, the law contemplates that they do occur. And it says that under normal circumstances, we run an ad in the paper. We give voters a good bit of previous notice, 30 days notice, and that we advertise it and post notices in the precinct and whatever. Of course, with this situation, we don't have time to do all those things. The next section I wanted to bring your attention to is further down in the page. At the very bottom of section D, it says that if we're establishing a polling place outside of the boundaries of the precinct, which would be the case here, that we would need to notify the state election boards by sending a report to them, explaining to them why we are doing what it is we're doing. And lastly, in section F, there is a requirement that says that we cannot change a polling location less than 30 days prior to a special election, except that when there's an emergency that happens that causes us to do otherwise. Mm-hmm. So taking all that into consideration, well, first of all, let me pause to see if there are any questions about what we've talked about so far. Okay, no. Hearing none. Travis, could you flip back now, please, to the second page of that report?
Oh, excuse me. Actually, Lynn, I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
What constitutes an emergency?
Well, I think it's anything that happens outside of the time frame specified by law for making these changes that makes the facility unavailable for whatever reason.
Okay.
So there's no particular definition, but it's anything that causes us to take action in situations where we have no other choice.
And oh yeah, and I didn't mean that generally, but I did mean legally. I didn't know what legally constituted an emergency, but that's fine. When we're with Rachel, I'll ask her.
Well, okay. Well, Rachel, would you like to weigh in now?
Sure. Well, in the statute, like Lynn just said, there is no definition of emergency. I think it is done purposefully so that it can conform to whatever the board might need it to be at some point. But for us, it's unavoidable because it's unavailable because it's not stable. So in that situation, it would be considered emergency.
Yeah, like act of God, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so just to acknowledge some of the legal things, we've put a few things down. Number one, by taking this action, we're acknowledging that there is a provision in that top code section that we talked about in section A, where the law does contemplate there are situations where emergencies happen or an event happens that renders the facility is unavailable or unusable. We also acknowledge that we would not be able to meet the requirements in section 265, but also section F way at the bottom, but also acknowledge that code section knows and recognizes that there are emergency situations that come up from time to time and unavoidable situations. The last thing that we would acknowledge is that we will not be able to meet the 30-day rule that's required by a state election board rule to notify voters ahead of time, 30 days ahead of time, to any changes such as this. We've come up with an implementation plan for making this change as follows. We will use social media and press releases to the extent that we can to get the information out. We've made arrangements and have put the engineering department of the city of Augusta on standby for very quick placement of one of those big portable flashing signs that we can put at Minnick Park even as early as this afternoon to tell voters that the polling place has been relocated and to where it has been relocated. We also are in a position to send out notices to the voters in today's mail with the hope that it can reach as many as it can reach. It can't hurt anything to go ahead and send those notices out. So that's our action plan moving forward. And with that, I will pause and be glad to take any further questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I actually heard on the news at 12 o'clock news that there was a problem with the voting precinct at Minnick Park and that the Board of Elections was meet this afternoon. Mm-hmm. So are there going to be any more news releases out there in addition to what we've already done?
Yes, I planned it as soon as this meeting is over with and whatever the board decides, we will immediately send up a follow-up press release with the information and we'll post it on our website and everywhere else we can think to put it to get that word out. Yes, ma'am.
And it's my understanding that it is just an emergency situation for this coming election on Tuesday. Anything after that will be handled in a different fashion. Is that correct?
That is correct. I would not be surprised, certainly before we hit election year 2022, we're going to have to find an answer to the problem there because it's not going away. So we'll be addressing that soon to find a home for those voters.
Right. That this is just the emergency situation.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing else.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Sherry. Were you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes, I was.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on what Attorney Barnes just discussed. Because again, yours is such a powerful presence, Lynn. Have you done any interviews? Have you at times or considered doing any special interviews to let people know? Because I think that, I think the press release is good, but when people see you're on there, usually I think that gets their attention. I know it gets mine because if the head of the Board of Elections is saying something, then their ears usually perk up a little better. Okay. So I was just wondering about that. That's all.
Well, I hadn't planned a press conference if that's what you're talking about, but we should be able to put something together in that regard. If that's the will of the board, I'd be happy to do that. I know that the invitation to this meeting and the meeting itself is being live streamed, and I hope that members of the media are present watching the meeting now and will take an interest in it. But certainly I'm always available to answer questions and do anything I can to promote it and completely available and amenable to that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, my reason for saying that was that, we have an extraordinary situation here and we only have a short amount of time. And if we are going to divert people over to the Brigham Center, I think they should be given every possible means, and maybe somebody, friends or whatever, will let them know that, you vote in at Minnick Park. You better know that, that they change it up over there in time for that, because a lot of people only vote on election day. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Hearing none, I think that the motion needs to be that we waive the 30-day time period for the relocating of a polling place as provided in Section F of the law and establish the new polling location as Brigham Center for this election.
Mr. Chair, I move that we do.
And I second that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Properly moved and seconded that we waive the 30-day time period for relocating a polling place as provided in Section F of the law and establish a new polling place as Brigham Center. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes carry.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Where the board, the staff talked about this basically all afternoon yesterday, and we knew that wherever we landed, the best option at this point in the game was to keep those the Minnick Park voters and the voting equipment related to that precinct completely separated from any other voters that might be within that same precinct. And so since we're at the Brigham Center, we're voting in the gym, which is great. We'll basically split it in half with stanchions and have the Minnick Park voters come in one side. They'll have their own poll pads. They'll have their own machines, their own scanner over here. And the normal traditional voters at Brigham Center will be on the other side with their own separate equipment. So they'll be in the same gym, but operating completely separate with their own separate set of poll workers and whatnot. And we planned or talked yesterday about the need to divert perhaps even additional employees out there to help orient the voters who may be new to voting at the Brigham Center. We also think, even though, if we look at that chart that was on the report, we know we had around 500 people come out to the Brigham Center to vote during the general election. And we didn't have any crowd control problems or no reported issues out there at all. With this election, even with the 10% turnout, we're talking about 560 voters max we expect would come out to the facility to vote. So we could, out of an abundance of caution, hire an off-duty deputy just in case traffic becomes an issue, although I don't think it will. But that was one kind of wild card that was out there that we never really determined one way or the other whether it was needed. Do any of you all have any input on that?
Lynn, this is Bob Finnegan. I was out there this morning. I voted at the Brigham Center this morning. They have more than enough room in there from what you're saying to set up for both areas. The only bottleneck, if there is one, is the turn into it. I don't know if you'd need a police officer there or not, but it's just a little bit of a bottleneck to get into it.
Off of Golden Camp.
I would venture
Right.
to make the suggestion that we entertain that as something that we need to absolutely look into. And
Mr.
then,
Chair,
go with staff recommendation on that. Yes, ma'am,
Mr.
Sherry.
Chair, I move that we go with the staff's recommendation and we put an off-duty police officer there just out of an abundance of caution because
Yes,
it's an emergency situation.
yes.
Good.
There's a
second.
motion on the floor for staff recommendation for sheriff assistance in traffic control.
I'll second it.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we go with staff recommendation for additional traffic control at Brigham Center. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Mr.
Aye.
Ayes carry. Yes, sir, Terrence.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I did. While we are on the subject of traffic, I need to ask the director, ma'am, have we notified Augusta Public Transit, because they do make it clear that they're going to have free rides to the polls, but they may not be notified on this change. And I was hoping that, maybe we could also let them know so that they can kind of maybe post something and let them know that this change is being made and that people probably want to, make whatever proper arrangements.
Sure, that's a very easy thing to do. We're
Okay.
have a notice already 80% developed, short of plugging in the location, that we'll be posting in different commercial locations in the immediate area of Minnick Park. So we can easily forward that over to the transit department and ask them to publish it. We'll also, when we finish up this meeting, we'll go ahead and change the information on our website as well.
Thank you.
Lynn, how will we be separating those? I mean, I understand that we're going to have some labeling and we're going to have the signage out at Minnick Park. Will there be some sort of a signage outside of Brigham to direct those additional voters in the right direction there, or is it just going to be on the door? Help me understand what the logistics are there.
It's a great question. The voters will come into the same door, no matter the precinct. They'll enter the facility and they'll enter the gym also. Once they enter the gym, then they'll split off depending on whether it's precinct 208, the Minnick Park voters, or 503, the Brigham Center posters or precinct. And yes, there will be posters up on the bleachers or in the wall in the vicinity of the machines indicating that precinct number. And I think that also goes to, excuse me. Good old spring allergies, my apologies.
Yeah.
I think it also goes to, we were talking earlier about maybe putting some additional employees out there to help with traffic control. So in my mind's eye, I envision, kind of a greeter at the door, asking people as they come in. I don't expect there to be a line. I don't expect there to be floods of people, but certainly there'll be people coming in. But greeting them at the door and diverting them one way or the other, depending on which precinct they're in.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to add that my church is right there next to the Brigham Center, Belter's Presbyterian. And I will notify the trustees there so that if you need to use the parking right there, to be a little walk, but there would be additional parking also. And there's a health clinic right there that we share a parking lot.
Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Okay,
Fantastic.
all right.
Any other questions for Lynn or for Rachel with respect to the changes and the recommendations and motions that have passed today?
No.
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 Okay. Hearing none, and there being nothing else that's necessary for us from staff. Anything else from staff?
No, just by expressing gratitude for you getting together on such short notice and us all working together to find what I think is in fact, I'm sure is the best solution for the voters there at Minnick Park under these circumstances. So we will we'll move forward with making every effort we can to let people know of the change. And as I said, the letters are kind of sitting on go, and the sign to put out at Minnick Park is sitting on go. Terrence, your point is well taken about the transit department. So that's great. And we'll get the traffic control lined up and all the other things that we've talked about.
All right.
Thank
It would
you.
appear that we have come to the end of this meeting, and hearing no objection to that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Enjoy your
you.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.